Hello, class. I want to move us now from outline to draft. So once again, we are working with our writing process. This would be now moving on to part 3. I divided part 2 into 2 pieces. You're creating the thesis and then creating the outline. So here we are, if we find ourselves at part 3, which is our final part. And what we're going to be doing here is working with the outline. Now, to drive home how important an outline is, if you just skip all 11 steps and just jump to the draft, you're crazy. You're not going to have a productive writing process. So we want to make sure that we keep our outline handy as we move from the outlining stage to the drafting stage. You'll need to refer to it on repeated occasions. So my suggestion with drafting begins with a simple rule, and that is that when you put together your outline, 1 or 2 paragraphs really stood out as being fairly easy to construct. You know, you had all the pieces there, you laid them down. Now, there were other paragraphs that were much harder to, excuse me. Yeah, as I was saying, there are other parts that would be harder to plan and would have taken you a great deal of more energy to write and pull together. What you need to think about then is that you've given yourself ways in, entrance ramps for your paper. I always work with the rule that I want to do the easiest paragraph first. Whatever the paragraph was to plan or work with, one will have stood out, maybe a couple of them would have stood out. I don't care if it's paragraph 3 or paragraph 5 or paragraph 27. The bottom line is do the easiest paragraph first, which rules out doing the introduction and conclusion. As we want to note, we haven't talked about how to write an introduction and a conclusion yet. When we talked about our outline, I specifically told you, do not, when we talked about your outline, I specifically said, do not use your outline to plan your intro and conclusion. Use your outline only to plan the body of your paragraph and top it off with your body paragraphs and top it off with your thesis statements. So we are in this spot where introductions and conclusions are not going to come naturally to us. A proper introduction is going to introduce the paper, the body of the paper. A proper introduction is not having a lot to do with your grade. It's important to do to hook your readers in, to signal to them what you're about to do, to excite them. You can do lots of things with introductions, but we don't do them when we start drafting. This is the key rule here. They're too hard to do. Plus, I mean, you're essentially trying to sell a product, the body of the paragraph, the body paragraphs that you haven't actually put together yet. So don't bother with the intro and conclusions. Never start there in your draft. Jump right into the easiest paragraph. If you work out paragraph 3 with fairly few snarls, paragraph 4 might be a little easier to do with what you've learned. And then for that matter, paragraph 7, so on and so forth through the essay. As we are working, we need to recognize a basic truth about drafting itself. that when we write research papers, which is probably 95% of what you will do in college, is write about data, research, studies, and the like. But 95% of your college essays are research oriented. When we write body paragraphs for a research essay, we are anchoring each paragraph around a piece of data, a data point or two, a quotation, a statistic, a story. Yeah, a story can be a data point, absolutely. You learned that with the rabbit versus the hare Aesop fable, right? There was a lesson in that story. So yes, stories themselves can prove points. Young uses stories a lot. Sometimes multiple stories within one paragraph, sometimes just spending a paragraph with one story, sometimes spreading a story over multiple paragraphs. Always to prove a point, never just simply to deliver to you some neat data, but her data is always there to prove a point. It's always unified. There's always a claim made about it. So what the essential truth is, we always write about research. We always write about the writing. So I always start my draft by writing the middle part of the paragraph first. That's right, I don't really worry too much. I've got a topic sentence I'm working with from my working outline. I might lay that down, but I turn my attentions to treating that second part of a body paragraph. Here's those 4 components spelled out. That second part of the body paragraph is where I start my drafts. I lay down that quotation, I treat it, I signal phrase it, I add citation. By treatment, I mean I can edit it. I never want to use anything longer than a sentence in a quotation. And in fact, rarely do you see authors use full sentences. Young rarely uses full sentences. I want you to use the kind of tactics that Young uses when she presents quotations. She treats them, she edits them down to their essential parts so she can comment on that essential part, okay? And she would always be starting with, oh, I have this story about so-and-so doing such and such, and she would work that out, and then she would work out whether it needed one topic sentence or multiple topic sentences. But that would be the way that all researchers work, by laying down the proof first, and then writing around it, sandwiching it in between an introductory claim and an interpretation that points to words and phrases within the data, numbers within the data that matter, that are unusual, that are weird. Yeah, so when we work our paragraphs in the draft, we work inside out, as I'm pointing out. Next, we start to think about, while we're drafting, we start to think about what percentage of this work should be them, the researched material, versus what percentage should be us within our essays. And the answer is largely 80-20, 80% us, 20% them. You can go 90-10 as well. But when you turn it in, you get a score that declares what percentage of your paper comes from other papers. That has to be there. We never want to write a wholly original paper because we're asked to write about data, about findings. So we want to make sure that we fall between 10 and 20%. If we go higher than that, it begins to look like we're relying too much on our writers and not enough on our own editing skills and presentation skills and our own ideas. Remember, those outside sources prove your point. That's what they're supposed to do. So we want to be thinking about this revision that goes on as a process within this process. As we are working out our body paragraphs, as we're getting all the parts, the 4 parts, to work together smoothly. we are creating a process within the writing process. This is this process of, but literally the most fundamental part of the writing process is finding what you want to argue, finding what you believe. And you can only show what you really believe by really focusing in on the data, which is what our body paragraph structure ensures that we're always doing. Okay, so our next step is, as we work our body paragraphs, we learn more about our essay. We learn as much as we present through our writing process. And as you work your body paragraph, you will come to new knowledge about the topic. You'll see things that you hadn't originally noticed until you actually started drafting. You may have basically noticed some general things in the outline, but boy, when you're drafting, those things really stand out and are very specific, and they change how you've planned your body paragraphs. Well, if you're changing how you do your body paragraphs, make sure that you change 2 other issues within your paper. Make the changes reflected in your outline and in your thesis, okay? Make sure that any revision that you do within your body paragraphs is reflected in that thesis statement as well as your outline. I will tell you that you learn new angles as you work out the body paragraph parts. You learn new ways of treating the data. You rework, and the issue here is that as you learn, you need to rework the outline. But also, I want to point out a phenomenon that exists about 90% of the time in what I write. And that is that many times the last thought in my paragraph, particularly a body paragraph, really is the topic sentence. It's me sort of working out, look, I've worked my topic sentence and my proof and my commentary, and I've made them all talk together and synthesize, and they're all synthetically working together. They're all relating to each other. All the parts are singing along to the same harmony. And then it's time to wrap up. And so I'll just tell you, here's what I just showed you. Here's exactly what I just showed you. And I'll nail that sentence down at the end of the paragraph. I do this 90% of the time. That last sentence becomes my new topic sentence for that very same paragraph. I take that topic sentence, that last wrap-up sentence, and move it to the top and make it the new focal point, the new Mozart's musical accomplishments. Last thought in many ways is your best thought, and that's because of the paragraph processing. Now you can do this. Once you worked out your drafting, once you've worked out the body paragraphs and given them an essential shape, you can begin thinking about introductions. And introductions and conclusions, and they always arrive after you have finished up all the drafting and revision. Occasionally I'll take a side trip where, like, halfway through a draft I'll be like, oh heck, I know how I want to introduce this. And sometimes I can keep what I do when I do that sort of step outside the draft and do the intro, and sometimes I can't. Sometimes I can keep it, sometimes I can't. So think of intros and billboards. I want you to think of them differently. Particularly, let's talk about one problem with each, the way you've been taught generally versus the way it's kind of going to be expected of you, and the way I style my writing. Intros, we are frequently told to start generally and you work your way specifically, and then the thesis statement will be the most specific statement in the first paragraph, in the intro. Yeah, I don't want you to do that. Why start generally? Start lively, start interesting, start vivid. Grab your reader. Grab them with a fact or a quote or a crazy story. That's what you got to do. Intros can be thought of as billboards or hooks. Get vivid right away is my advice. And the billboard you're going to build here has to have bright colors and clear messages and so on and so forth. And it should lead us to the thesis statement. Make sure that whatever specifics you start in your intro with, that if your thesis covers 3 topics, make sure that you got at least a couple of them working from sentence 1 of your intro. Some reference to the topics that will appear in the thesis statement. This is much better than the hourglass shape we're taught about. Introductions have to be general until they get specific. No. That's a terrible rule. We want your readers are voracious for hot detail, for hot gossip, right? So give it to them. All right. Conclusions work a little bit differently, but again, come after you finish the draft. Why waste time? Let me ask you a fundamental question. And here again, we've been misled, I believe, by some of our writing teachers, that conclusions are essentially restatements of the thesis. Yeah, but what a waste. If you think about what you've accomplished in writing the body paragraphs of your essay, you've pulled off what is a magic feat. You've made strangers trust you. They've read your argument. They understand your argument. They may disagree with you, but if you've done it right, they will sense that you are fair and interesting and intelligent, and they will read that in there. So you're telling me after that experience, after building this trust relationship with your readers and with your audience, your final note is simply to repeat yourself? That can't be right. No, go ahead. Yeah, if you want to repeat the thesis, make it 1 sentence at the very beginning. But think about what you've earned. You've earned opportunities. And a conclusion is an opportunity to demonstrate that you have an opinion about things overall, that you want to spotlight certain elements of the story or facts that you just presented, that you want to update this story past what your original work covers with Young after 1990, right? That you want to contextualize and recontextualize. This is where, if you want to write about the connections between Trump and Truman, this is where you do it. This is where you bring us your thoughts on the war, not just the war in Vietnam, but the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, if that's where you can go. Grab your platform and use it. Don't simply repeat yourself. If you got to repeat yourself, keep it short, all right? Revise your thesis to finish your essay. Make sure that you proofread. Now, step number 16 is proofread to be clear. My advice on this comes down to you've got to make what you wrote strange to you. It has to be experienced anew for you to catch some of the subtle things that you didn't catch when you would read it and read what you thought you wrote as opposed to what you actually wrote. We want to read what we actually wrote. So there are 2 suggestions. The first suggestion requires you to have friends or family. I hope we can all tackle that. But my suggestion is make 2 copies of your paper. Print up 2 copies. Give 1 to your partner and have them read your paper to you while you hold a pen in your hand and mark everywhere they struggle. You will definitely be seeing and hearing the issues within your essay. This is a good way to catch awkward sentences, elided phrases. You know, you keep thinking you keep putting the in a sentence and you keep reading the in a sentence, even though you failed to put the in that sentence. This is where that will come to light. This is where you will see that error and mistake. So get your work read to you is suggestion number 1 when it comes to proofreading. If they have problems reading it, you have problems writing it. Work it out loud. That's always a way through awkward phrasing. Work aloud. Then make sure if you don't have the partner for this, if you're pressed for time or whatever it is, you can always read it out loud to yourself, but don't read it sentence by sentence. Read it line by line. Use a a bookmark to guide your eyes down the page one line at a time to make sure that you're reading exactly what you wrote and not assuming anything. When you hit turn it in, know all your details. You've made that clear by paying attention to your instructions at step number 1. So it all works out that you turn it in. And that is our writing process. Yeah. One more thought. Many times we don't have a lot of faith in our outlines, but we need to be completing our outlines and revising our outlines. Going back to number 13, I forgot to point out something about number 13 and how, look, as you learn things about your essay, let me point out that you need to change your outline to reflect your new lessons. You want to change the outline for the same reason a builder would change a blueprint if he walked into the bathroom and according to the blueprint, the toilet is supposed to be on the north side of the bathroom, but he notes that the piping is on the south side of the bathroom. So he's going to put the toilet on the south side of the bathroom. He's going to need to change the blueprint so that everybody steps into that bathroom from this moment forward, knows exactly what to expect and won't have a WTF moment about it. So we want to, this reflects an understanding of writing that we're going to change the plan of the writing. We want to make sure that we note our changes within our essay maps, within our outlines. Okay, so that, I believe, is the wrap up for the writing process, drafting, outlining, drafting, and revision. All right, guys, so we will see you soon around the YouTube, around the Zoom. You take care.